So construction is underway, press conferences have been had, and the US's first 200-mile-per-hour class, or 300-kilometer-per-hour high-speed rail line between Las Vegas and Los Angeles is finally under construction. And not with some worn and recycled train, but with the newest Velaro units from Siemens, which, dare I say, have a little taste of Japanese Shinkansen in them. But there's a problem. While the famed Acela high-speed rail service between Washington, D.C. and Boston has the lovely downtown direct connections, it lacks 300-kilometer-per-hour class tracks, that is 200 miles per hour. Or, for that matter, new trains. Brightline West, on the other hand, will be a 200-mile-per-hour class line, and it will have brand new trains, but its station locations will mean that people will almost always have to connect using a bus or a taxi to their final destinations. Now, I hope it's absolutely clear that I am super bullish on North American high-speed rail, and I think it's absolutely true that more lines with more fast trains is an improvement, even if they don't necessarily go everywhere we want them to. But if we really want to see the benefits of high-speed trains, we can't be dropping people off from them in a parking lot. So in this video, I want to tackle the problem of the last mile for Brightline West, or in the case of the LA end, the last 30, so that this project can be an even bigger success than it's already likely to be. Welcome to RM Transit, a channel with detailed transit thoughts. Consider subscribing so you never miss a video. Brightline West is kind of worse off than regular Florida Brightline. That's anchored at one end by a beautiful Miami station that has Metro Mover as well as literal metro connections, and on the other end by a giant airport, which is a transportation hub in its own right. And I talked about all of that in a previous video. Brightline West is not going to have the benefit of that on either end, which makes getting people to the relatively high-capacity trains a real issue. They are planning on building loads of parking at the stations GO transit style, but the unfortunate issue about cars and their space and efficiency is that you just can't fill up that many trains with all of that parking. Now, on the Vegas end, the gap isn't such a huge problem. The Brightline station is going to be roughly at the south end of the airport, and within walking or cycling range of the southern end of the Strip and Mandalay Bay. That is, assuming you want to walk or cycle a couple miles along Las Vegas Boulevard in the Vegas heat. But at the end of the day, the solutions here aren't that complicated. A nice multi-use path, frequent bus service, perhaps a monorail extension, though I imagine that might not happen for the same reasons that the extension to the airport hasn't materialized. If the station must be located this far from the city center, at least consider building the Las Vegas Rapid Transit system I talked about in a previous video. Of course, it's probably true that Vegas doesn't really have a city center. Some might argue it's downtown, but I would argue that it's actually the center of the Bellagio's fountain. But it is unfortunate that a station isn't at least going to be along the Strip, where you can at least kind of get by walking and people moving your way around, even if you do have to deal with a lot of pedestrian bridges and stairs. Fortunately, that's not something that an elevated extension and an elevated Shinkansen-style station over Interstate 15 behind the Aria couldn't fix. The LA end, on the other hand, is much more complicated, because the Brightline connection is really more to Inland Empire, the metro area to the east of LA County, than to LA itself. Now, on one hand, that might not be as terrible as it sounds, because Inland Empire, which has cities such as Riverside and San Bernardino, actually has over 4 million people by itself, which is nothing to sneeze at. And it is true, as City Nerd talks about in one of his videos, that a lot of people making the drive between Los Angeles and Las Vegas will be passing the station at Rancho. So you could sort of cut your drive short and start the party early by getting on the train instead of driving the entire way. But with the massive population of LA County right there, and the LA that people think of when you say LA, better connections really seem like a no-brainer. So let's talk about the options. The most obvious thing is that Rancho Cucamonga is already a Metrolink station, LA's regional rail system. And I say regional rail because the service already isn't terrible for North America. You get roughly hourly service between San Bernardino and downtown LA. And that's even true in the counter-peak direction, which is pretty unique within North America. And all of that means that a downtown LA to Las Vegas area trip should be just around 3.5 hours, which is faster than driving the same journey. Albeit that relies on a timed connection, which you would hope for, but which we may not actually see. We'll have to wait. But ultimately, this isn't a long-term solution, because there's no through service, there isn't much frequency, and capacity is limited. So let's look at our options. As it turns out, as part of Metrolink's SCORE program, which isn't exactly shooting for the stars frequency-wise, there'll be half-hourly service on the San Bernardino line, which runs through Rancho. And while this won't make trips a whole lot faster, it will at least give people a bit more flexibility with their connections, since a half-hour wait at a Brightline station is actually not the worst thing in the world. But honestly, I just think so much more should be done. When I saw videos of the Brightline West groundbreaking and the Secretary of Transportation was talking to the founder of Brightline, I just wanted to scream, "Pete!" It's obvious that what should happen is that with the running start that Caltrain electrification and Brightline West give us, the San Bernardino line should be fully double-tracked, electrified, and signaled with ETCS, just like Brightline West and unlike Caltrain. And at the same time, a bunch of grade separation should be done. Now, this is inevitably a multi-billion-dollar project. But for that price, you get to slash emissions, get really frequent regional rail to the Inland Empire from Los Angeles, you can extend the Redlands Aero service as far west as you want, and of course get electric high-speed rail service all the way to LA Union Station far before it's going to happen with California high-speed rail, probably by like 2030. Now yes, it's far from perfect because the San Bernardino line will still have a lot of level crossings, and platform heights might also be a bit of an issue. But that's not totally unheard of on other high-speed rail systems, and this is all totally technically doable. Even the sections of the line west of El Monte that are sort of interwoven with the busway are completely fixable. Because it's just as wide as the current single-track provision in the middle of the highway that carries the San Bernardino line, the columns for an elevated viaduct that could carry 2 tracks. Just like you commonly see with high-speed rail lines all around the world. And so with a couple $2 billion and new electric trains with higher performance that can climb steeper grades, this should all be totally workable. Now, the next obvious project that should happen is bringing the LA Metro A line, that is the Gold Line, all the way to the station. LA Metro is actually already planning to extend the A line to Montclair, and from there it would only be a roughly 8-mile or 12-kilometer further extension to get to Rancho Cucamonga. This might sound like a huge expense, but the entire eastern portion of the A line is already built in existing rail corridors, so it's actually a pretty simple project, and it would mean that you could also upgrade and double-track the Metrolink line and add some grade separations at the same time. The LA Metro line does actually give you another connection to Union Station, and hell, all the way to Long Beach if you want to ride the entire length of the world's longest light rail line. But it also provides direct connections to people in the north of the San Gabriel Valley, in places like Azusa and Pasadena, bringing them to Brightline without needing to backtrack into downtown LA. And who knows, maybe once you get to Rancho Cucamonga, you can have some tram train style action, and the light rail line can turn into a bit of a local connector for the last couple of miles. Of course, the biggest wildcard in all of this is California high-speed rail. And whether or not you think I'm overly pessimistic on the project, there is a plan on the Los Angeles to San Diego segment of the project to build a line east from Los Angeles into Inland Empire, but that project is at least 10 to 15 years away optimistically. And so I don't think through trains or electrification of the San Bernardino line should be put on hold because high-speed rail to LA Union Station is imminent. If anything, a link that people can ride sooner that makes them go, huh, this isn't very fast, we should have a faster line, would probably make the case for that high-speed rail connection more than anything else. I also just think that having 2 electric routes from Union to Inland Empire will be a huge asset in the long term, providing tons of capacity to a key and growing sub-region, but also providing some redundancy in the network so that if there's a problem in one of the lines, high-speed trains are still able to get to downtown LA. You can also ultimately end up designating one of them as the fast route, probably the new high-speed rail alignment, and the other as the local route, splitting express and local trains appropriately. Of course, an electrified San Bernardino line would be a great thing even if high-speed rail wasn't going to happen, but since there is going to be high-speed rail, this is a great impetus to get that project done. And of course, it helps get more faster trains across more of the state faster. And if this kind of thing tickles your fancy, you've probably already seen Nandert's Ontario Airport video. But if you haven't, it's fantastic, you should. It talks about a lot of the plans in the area and how they tie in with a major expansion of Ontario Airport, which as Nandert points out, has a huge amount of potential to grow into a bit of an LAX competitor, which would also be a really nice transportation hub to connect to Rancho Cucamonga, again as Nandert points out, because people from the deserts to the north of Los Angeles could then use that airport as their own kind of local airport in concert with Brightline West. At the end of the day, Brightline West, while imperfect, is still hugely exciting, because it is a piece in a much larger transportation puzzle for Southern California. And not to mention California as a whole. We just need to remember that we can put more big pieces in place fairly easily, and that the local connections are probably even more important than the intercity ones. Thanks for watching.